What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and continue learning about the biggest cities in Canada ranked. Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1, feel free to go check that out or stay here in Part 2. That's perfectly fine as well. But in Part 1, we started looking at and appreciating Canada's biggest cities in order of worst to best. And we got through the first 5 cities in part 1, and now we're going to take a look at the top 4 biggest, best cities in all of Canada. But in part 1, I was a bit surprised, I got to admit. There were a couple Canadian cities I had never really heard about or learned about before. But also, in the bottom 5 was Toronto has been named, and Vancouver has been named already. They are out of the running for the biggest, best city in Canada, according to this video series anyway. So I'm not exactly sure what's left to talk about here for the top 4 biggest, best cities in Canada. So I'm actually quite excited to take a look at this here today and to finish this up. So let's take a look.
Number 4, Quebec City, Quebec. You thought Vancouver got a lot of...
Oh, yes, right. Okay. I'm sorry, Quebec City, but this makes so much... Now that I hear it, I remember Quebec City exists now. I learned a little bit about Quebec City in a YouTube video I did a long time ago, actually. Beautiful city, beautiful, kind of historical looking, right? It's been a while. Most Americans, no offense, like, don't know any Canadian cities besides, like, Toronto or Vancouver. Maybe Ottawa. Maybe Ottawa's going to be on this list as well, is it? Anyway, Quebec City, this makes sense to me. It's very cool, right?
Of precipitation. Quebec is saying, hold my beer. Or actually, they probably say, tiens ma bière, because French is the official language.
Right.
Français
Right.
anglais, Quebec is the snowiest major city in North America, with an average snowfall of over 400 centimeters each year. Rather than...
Oh, that's interesting, because in part 1, they ranked a lot of the cities in part 1 low, because they are really cold. But now it's like Quebec City is the snowiest of the biggest cities in all of Canada. It must be pretty awesome to be snowy and so highly ranked. Number 4 out of the 9. Or maybe Canadians just love the snow. I don't know.
hide from the cold and snow, however. The city welcomes it with plenty of winter sports and festivals.
Okay.
From December to March, Old Quebec, which feels like a medieval town in Europe, transforms into a snowy Christmas village full of lights and decorations. And no matter the time of year...
That's so awesome. Look at this picture. Oh my god. Look at this drone shot here. This is ridiculous. What a metropolis. That's a word I don't get to use too often. But look at it. It's beautiful.
The only remaining walled city north of Mexico is teeming with history, with over 30 unique museums and gorgeous nearby parks such as Montmorency Falls. But honestly, Quebec's best museum is just getting lost on the 400-year-old cobblestone streets of Old Town, as there is no turn you can take.
Oh my god, it is it's so historical. Cobblestone roads. Where the heck do you go to find cobblestone pathways? Well, Quebec City, apparently. It's just such a cool place. Might be a little difficult to get around if you're not from there, because it's very, very French-speaking, right? It is literally French-Canadian.
They won't reward you with awe-inspiring architecture, such as the Chateau Frontenac, with its sweeping views of the St. Lawrence River. And while the other neighborhoods aren't as historic, they're still charming and vibrant, with top-notch restaurants, breweries, and cafes in Saint-Roch and Vieux-des-Mallieux, and great nightlife in Saint-Jean-Baptiste. And best of all...
I couldn't tell you what they just said. Couldn't tell you.
Well, it's a fraction of the cost of most other Canadian cities, with an average home value of just $350,000.
What? Okay, if you've seen part one, like like the homes in Toronto and Vancouver were like $1 million. Like, I'm not exaggerating, like over $1 million. Quebec City looks beautiful, seems awesome. You probably have to like be good at French. That's the only caveat. And the home prices are actually like reasonable. Like 300,000, like that's a lot. Like, don't get me wrong, but when you're talking about $1 million or 300,000, it at least starts to look possible.
Add in the fact that it's the safest North American city with by far the lowest unemployment and poverty rates in Canada, and maybe
Hold on. I got pause it again quickly. Quebec City, Canada is the safest city in North America? Is that what they said? In all of North America, this is the safest?
American city with by far the lowest unemployment.
Hold on. That's what he said, right?
And add in the fact that it's the safest North American city with by far the lowest unemployment and poverty rates in Canada, and maybe you'll want to learn French after all.
Right.
Wow,
that was number 4. What's gonna beat that? We're on to number 3. This is the top 3. Biggest and the best Canadian cities. Here we go.
Number 3, Ottawa, Ontario.
Ottawa! Ottawa did make it. Okay, I finally remembered that Ottawa existed and Quebec City existed. That's the American in me showing. What the heck is left for number 1 and 2? Let's maybe I'll remember while we appreciate Ottawa for a second here. Number 3.
Ottawa at number 3? But isn't it just government stuff and protests?
Oh.
Boring! Okay, so it's not the most exciting city by any stretch of the imagination, but statistically, Canada's capital is near perfect. The absurdly low crime rates and excellent schools make it the best place in the nation to raise a family. And
wow. Let's just take a moment to look at this picture. Holy cow. I didn't know Ottawa was this beautiful. And it's on, like, is this got a lake or river that it's built upon? It's got historical buildings. Does Ottawa have a stereotype of being, like, boring or something? I have to admit, it's not talked about that much. It is a Canadian city a lot of Americans have at least heard of, Ottawa. So it's got that going for it.
And it also possesses an incredibly strong and diverse job market with a median household after-tax income of $84,000. Probably due to the fact that it has the most educated workforce in North America. And while it's certainly not cheap, compared to Vancouver or Toronto, it is affordable with an average home value of $612,000 and the
600. Oh my God, man. We're at a day and age where $600,000 is being said in the same sentence as affordable housing. Absolute madness, I tell you. But Ottawa does seem pretty cool. A little more affordable, I guess. Maybe this is a sleeper pick. Like, it's not really the one you expected at number 3 in the rankings, but it's kind of a under the radar good place to live.
Average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment being $1,700 a month. If you're looking for a true big city, however, I'll be blunt. Ottawa ain't it. But while the capital is effectively a collection of small towns and suburbs, it's also a lot more fun than you might expect.
You know, I'm okay with that. Like, it depends on your personality. You might want a big city. I think I would be perfectly fine with, like, a smaller city. You get all the benefits of being by a bunch of cool stuff, of being by a city, probably lots of employment opportunities, but it's not like a massive city where you're stuck in traffic all day and maybe overwhelmed by people. Unless you're the kind of person who gets energized by that, then maybe Ottawa isn't for you, but I like what I'm hearing.
Bytown is home to plenty of incredible museums, an underrated food scene, easy access to beautiful, quiet nature, a stunning sculpture garden, the largest ice skating rink.
Wow! Ottawa is really impressing me right now. What the heck? They got dragon sculptures and giant ice rinks. How would you not be crashing into people skating down this thing? That's how you point out the American. Skating down the giant Ottawa ice rink. It's the one falling on their face, bumping into everyone.
In the world. And of course, the biggest Canada Day celebration. But without further ado,
Number 2.
Calgary, Alberta.
Calgary? Calgary, Alberta? Calgary, Alberta? That's so extraordinarily random to me. I've heard of Calgary. I just don't know much about it, or Alberta. Although I know that Alberta does not have any rats. I did a video on that once. Alberta does not have any rats. It's got that going for it. What is in Calgary, Alberta? Number 2, over Ottawa, Quebec City, Vancouver, Toronto, and a bunch of others. Calgary, Alberta. Okay, I like this. I didn't expect it.
Calgary might not even have 1.5 million residents, but size isn't everything because Cowtown looks and acts much bigger. Its urban
Wow.
core is similar in size to Dallas or Seattle, despite those metro
Okay.
areas having vastly larger population.
Oh, so it's a gigantic city that somehow doesn't have that gigantic of a population. That's kind of cool. It's like you just can do whatever you want in Calgary. It's just empty. Now it's still got 1.5 million people. I've never seen a picture like this here of the city of Calgary. It's obviously a huge, like, holy cow, these are skyscrapers, like massive buildings, and an arena. All right, it's got my attention. Okay.
And with plenty of unique buildings and the gorgeous Rocky Mountains in the backdrop,
Oh.
Calgary's skyline is one of the prettiest in North America, especially since it's the cleanest
Okay.
city on Earth. And the
What? Some of the most random facts in this video, I tell you, about these cities. Calgary, cleanest city on Earth, not in North America, on the planet. How? Why? Okay, I'm not complaining. Cool.
reason Calgary has so many skyscrapers is because it, not Vancouver, is the economic center of Western Canada, with the second largest number of corporate head offices behind only Toronto. As such, Calgary has the most millionaires per capita in Canada and the highest after-tax median household income at $87,000.
What? So, oh my gosh, Calgary. I'm sorry for underestimating you. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. Huge business mecca, like more of a hub of business and economy and stuff than Vancouver when it comes to Western Canada. Who would have thought? Okay.
Although similar to Edmonton, the economy is heavily reliant on the oil and gas industries, which
okay.
can boom and bust at any time.
Okay.
But regardless of how the economy is doing, you can always count on remarkable access to jaw-dropping nature
Wow.
and 333 sunny days per year to enjoy it. Banff
I forget about this. Oh, it has Banff, or it's by Banff National Park, I think they're about to say. It's got the mountains. I don't even think about that kind of stuff. That's amazing. Amazing access to like nature. Okay, I'm really coming around on this.
National Park and the Badlands of Drumheller are each just 90 minutes away, and the city
Okay.
enjoys over 20,000 acres of green spaces and parks along the gorgeous Elbow and Bow rivers, as
Okay.
well as 1,000 kilometers of bike paths, which actually gives Calgary the most extensive biking network in North America.
Yeah, there's a lot of upside to Calgary. Like, this is a very good pitch. If you're a bit of an outdoorsman and enjoy biking or hiking or mountains, and you don't want to live in the most overpopulated city ever, but a city that has like a decent amount of wealth and prosperity, Calgary, Alberta. Who knew?
Throw in no sales tax, one of the best light rail systems, great diversity, an assortment of hip neighborhoods, and the largest rodeo in the world.
Oh.
And it's no wonder Forbes just ranked Calgary as the third most...
Wait. Yes, Calgary has the Calgary Stampede. I learned about that once. Calgary Stampede. Some of this stuff sticks with me. You see, I can learn a thing or two. Right, as the Calgary Stampede, right.
most livable city on Earth.
Wait, what? What?
Forbes just ranked Calgary as the third most livable city on Earth.
I've heard of Calgary. I didn't know it had all this hype. Third most livable city on Earth? Why don't more people live there? It's like not that overpopulated. Maybe the secret's out now. Okay, very cool. It has like the most millionaires who live there or something. Maybe it's very, very expensive. Maybe that's the caveat or something. Either way, that's a cool surprise for number 2. But I'm really, really interested in learning about what the heck is number 1 on this list of the biggest and the highest ranked Canadian city. We've gone through like every big Canadian city I can think of, right? Like Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, Quebec City, Calgary. this must be somewhere I'm not thinking of. Or I'm going to be very, 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 very embarrassed because I'm missing something obvious.
Number 1, Montreal, Quebec.
Montreal. Ah! Ah! Of course, I was missing something obvious. Montreal. Man, we covered a Quebec city, a French-Canadian city. I thought the bases were covered. Montreal. That is definitely a city like most Americans have heard of. For some reason, it slipped my mind. I think it would slip most Americans' mind. No offense, because again, we just say like, oh, Canadian cities, Toronto or something, you know. But I've heard of Montreal, of course, it's famous. But I didn't necessarily associate it with being the number one biggest, best, most desirable Canadian city to live in. So I'm really curious to hear them explain why that is.
Yes, Montreal may no longer be Canada's largest city, and Toronto does have a much stronger economy. But in
Okay.
terms of cultural significance, uniqueness, and just all-around fun, no city in Canada even comes close.
Really? This wins just on the cool factor. Like it's just the coolest, best, most interesting place to live. It is in Quebec. It's French Canadian. So there is a big caveat of like you need to probably be pretty good at French to get around and actually be able to do things and interact with people. So that is like one kind of, caveat for being able to live there, I imagine.
In fact, I'd argue New York is the only US city that does. From the winding staircases of the colorful row homes to the pride and people of each unique walkable neighborhood to the
Okay.
world-class restaurants, museums, nightlife, festivals, and
Okay.
universities, so much soul saturates
Ooh.
this city. Sure,
Wow, it's massive. Okay, so much soul. They're really like I hope they come up with some like data points about Montreal. The narrator's really just focusing on like it's got cool stuff, cool people, cool events, universities, and that kind of thing.
Sure, taxes are high, winters are brutal, and not knowing French will create some barriers. But Montreal
Right.
doesn't just look like a European city. It embodies a
Oh.
European style of life where people work to live rather than live to work, which they can
Okay.
afford to do since rent is so cheap.
Rent is cheap. How is it so cheap to live here? They're not explaining very much about Montreal. And even the narrator was admitting the winters can be brutal. It can be cold. There's a language barrier, but it sounds like they're really arguing that Montreal has a presence to it, a European flavor, where it's a great place to be if you want to enjoy life, which is a very interesting sort of metric to go off of for choosing the number one biggest and best city in Canada. But what the heck, it's their rankings. I I'm just interested in hearing about how they argue for these rankings, and honestly, this is all in good fun anyway. So I don't mind it. Montreal, number one. Okay.
Work to live rather than live to work, which they can afford to do since rent is so cheap. Montreal personifies that je ne sais quoi better than any other city in Canada, and
Okay.
without a doubt is the best big city in this great country.
Wow, without a doubt. Really. Fascinating. And the rent, how is the rent cheap? How is rent or housing cheap if it's so amazing? That doesn't make sense to me. I'm suspicious a little bit, but I actually enjoyed this quite a bit. This was such a fun look into 9 of the biggest Canadian cities, and just for that reason, I enjoyed going through this, seeing the cities, and talking about some of the highlights of each city and what they have to offer. This was by From Here to There, and I got to give this a like because it is a very, very enjoyable video. I got to be honest, and I learned a lot about Canadian cities. But if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like, or feel free to leave a comment, sharing your opinion on if you agree with this list. I know this can be a little controversial, ranking cities, ranking where people live, their home, So again, it'd be interesting to hear, start some arguments, start some controversy, and just for fun, what people think about this list, and if these rankings make sense, or if there were, some of these cities should be switched around in the rankings. So that'd be fun to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and Canadian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.